Hey, second grade, it's Mrs. Gallagher, Coopertown teacher. It is so nice to be spending some time with you today, sharing a story, which is one of my favorite things to do. And I am going to share one of my absolute favorite stories. It's my favorite genre, which if you came into my classroom and saw that I'm a little obsessed with books, I have so many. And the bins that I have the most of, biography. Hands down, my favorite genre. I just love reading about famous people and how they overcame adversity and how they solved their problems. And I try and sort of channel their positive energy into, things that are happening in my own world. So I hope you do the same today with this story about Wilma Rudolph. This story is called Wilma Unlimited. Can you see? Here we go. And it's How Wilma Rudolph Became the World's Fastest Woman. It's by Kathleen Kroll, and it's illustrated by David Diaz. I wanted to share before we started the story how David Diaz illustrated this story, because I think it's cool. So each one of these pages is pictures that he painted. They're paintings. And then the background, you'll notice the background are actually photographs that he arranged. So I love that, this idea of a border and a painting. So there's not going to be any pictures, any photographs that you might find in a biography. This looks, when you first look at it, it almost looks like a fictional story, but it's not. Although I have to say, some of the things that Wilma Rudolph overcame are going to seem impossible. So let's get to it. Okay. It starts out, no one expected, I'm going to read, then I'll turn the page. No one expected such a tiny girl to have a first birthday. In Clarksville, Tennessee, in 1940, life for a baby who weighed just over 4 pounds at birth was sure to be limited. Most babies didn't have 19 older brothers and sisters to watch over them. Most babies didn't have a mother who knew home remedies and a father who worked several jobs. Most babies weren't Wilma Rudolph. 19 brothers and sisters. Wow. Wilma did celebrate her first birthday, and everyone noticed that as soon as this little girl could walk, she ran or jumped instead. She worried people, though. She was always so small and sickly. If a brother or sister had a cold, she got double pneumonia. One of them had measles, Wilma got measles too, plus mumps and chickenpox. Her mother always nursed her at home. Doctors were a luxury for the Rudolph family. And anyway, only one doctor in Clarksville would treat Black people. Just before Wilma turned 5, she got sicker than ever. Her sisters and her brothers heaped all the family's blankets on her, trying to keep her warm. During that sickness, Wilma's left leg twisted inward, and she couldn't move it back. Not even Wilma's mother knew what was wrong. The doctor came to see her. Besides scarlet fever, he said, Wilma had also been stricken with polio. In those days, most children who got polio either died or were permanently crippled. There was no cure. The news spread around Clarksville. Wilma, that lively little girl would never walk again. You see it? But Wilma kept moving any way she could. By hopping on one foot, she can get herself around the house, to the outhouse, in the backyard, and even on Sundays to church. Wilma's mother urged her on. Mrs. Rudolph had plenty to do. Cooking, cleaning, sewing patterned flour sacks into clothes for her children, now 22 in all. Yet twice a week, she and Wilma took the bus to the nearest hospital that would treat Black patients some 50 miles away in Nashville. They rode together in the back, and the only place where Blacks were allowed to sit. Doctors and nurses at the hospital helped Wilma do exercises to make her paralyzed leg stronger. At home, Wilma practiced them constantly, even when it hurt. So you might be making some connections at this point about Wilma's skin color, about some of the injustices that she suffered because of her skin color, in addition to the hardships with her sickness. To Wilma, what hurt most was that the local school wouldn't let her attend because she couldn't walk. Tearful and lonely, she watched her brothers and sisters run off to school each day, leaving her behind. Finally, tired of crying all the time, she decided she had to fight back somehow. This doesn't seem fair. Wilma worked so hard at her exercises that the doctors decided she was ready for a heavy steel brace. With a brace supporting her leg, she didn't have to hop anymore. School was possible at last. But it wasn't the happy place she had imagined. Her classmates made fun of her brace. During playground games, she could only sit on the sidelines, twitchy with impatience. She studied the other kids for hours, memorizing moves, watching the ball zoom through the rim of the basket that they used as a hoop. Wilma fought the sadness by doing more leg exercises. Her family always cheered her on, and Wilma did everything she could to keep them from worrying about her. At times, her leg really did seem to be getting stronger. Other times, it just hurt. Let's check that picture out for a minute. Can you see her brace on her leg? Right here. You see it? You see it right there? One Sunday, on her way to church, Wilma felt especially good. She and her family had always found strength in their faith, and church was Wilma's favorite place in the world. Everyone she knew would be there, talking, laughing, praying, and singing. It would be just the place to try the bravest thing she had ever done. She hung back while people filled the old building. Standing alone, the sound of hymns coloring the air, she unbuckled her heavy brace and set it by the church's front door. Taking a deep breath, she moved one foot in front of the other. Her knees were trembling violently. She took her mind off her knees by concentrating on taking another breath and then another. Wow. Thinking about how brave Wilma must have been at that moment. Here's another picture. Look, there she is. Can you imagine? Well, Whispers rippled through the gathering. Wilma Rudolph was walking. Row by row, heads turned toward her, and she walked alone down the aisle. Her large family, all her family's friends, everyone from school, each person stared wide-eyed. The singing never stopped. It seemed to burst right through the walls and into the trees. Finally, Wilma reached a seat in the front and began singing too, her smile triumphant. Oh, I feel the joy there. Wilma practiced walking as often as she could after that, and when she was 12 years old, she was able to take off the brace for good. She and her mother realized she could get along without it. So one memorable day, they wrapped that hated brace in a box and they mailed it back to the hospital. As soon as Wilma sent that box away, she knew her life was beginning all over again. How about that? There it is. Packed up. After years of sitting on the sidelines, Wilma couldn't wait to throw herself into basketball, the game she had most liked to watch. She was skinny, but no longer tiny. Her long legs would propel her across the court and through the air, and she knew all the rules and all the moves. In high school, she led her basketball team to one victory after another. Eventually, she took the team all the way to the Tennessee State Championships. There, to everyone's astonishment, her team lost. They were expected to win the state championships. They lost. Wilma had become accustomed to winning. Now she slumped on the bench, all the liveliness knocked out of her. But at the game that day was a college coach. He admired Wilma's basketball playing, but he was especially impressed with the way she ran. He wanted her for his track and field team. With his help, Wilma won a full athletic scholarship to Tennessee State University. She was the very first member of her family to go to college. Hear that? Something good happened out of that day. Can you see her sitting there? Sort of shrugged. And this is the college coach that recognized her talent. 8 years after she mailed her brace away, Wilma's long legs and years of hard work carried her thousands of miles from Clarksville, Tennessee. The summer of 1960, she arrived in Rome, Italy to represent the United States at the Olympic Games as a runner. Just participating in the Olympics was a deeply personal victory for Wilma, but her chances of winning a race were limited. Simply walking in Rome's shimmering heat was a chore, and athletes from other countries had run faster races than Wilma had ever. Women weren't thought to run very well. Anyway, track and field was considered a sport for men, and the pressure from the public was intense. For the first time ever, the Olympics would be shown on television, and all the athletes knew that more than 100 million people would be watching. Worst of all, Wilma had twisted her ankle just after she had arrived in Rome. It was still swollen and painful on the day of her first race. Remember, it's 1960, and this is the first time that the Olympics was televised. Yet, once it was her turn to compete, Wilma forgot her ankle and everything else. She lunged forward, not thinking about her fear, her pain, or the sweat flying off her face. She ran better than she had ever done before. And she ran better than anyone else. Grabbing the attention of the whole world, Wilma Rudolph of the United States won the 100-meter dash. No one else even came close. An Olympic gold medal was hers to take home. So when it was time for the 200-meter dash, Wilma's graceful long legs were already famous. Her ears buzzed with the sound of the crowd chanting her name. Such support helped her ignore the rain that was beginning to fall. At the crack of the starting gun, she surged into the humid air like a tornado. When she crossed the finish line, she had done it again. She finished far ahead of everyone else. She had earned her second gold medal. Wet and breathless, Wilma was exhilarated by the double triumph. The crowd went wild. Now the 400-meter relay race was yet to come. Wilma's team faced the toughest competition of all. And as the fourth and final runner on her team, it was Wilma who had to cross the finish line. There's another picture. There she is. That's her starting a 200-meter. Now, this is a relay race. I don't know if you know how that works, but in this particular race, there are 4 individuals, and each runs about 100 meters, and they pass a baton. Can you see here, this baton? Oh, right here. There you go. Can you see it? So she'll finish hers. She'll finish her 100 meters, and then she'll pass here to the next person on her team. Well, Wilma's teammates ran well. They passed the baton smoothly and kept the team in first place. Wilma readied herself for the dash to the finish line as her third teammate ran toward her. She reached back for the baton and nearly dropped it. As she tried to recover from the fumble, 2 other runners sped past her. Wilma and her team were suddenly in third place. Ever since the day she had walked down the aisle at church, Wilma had known the power of concentration. Now, legs pumping, she put her mind to work. In a final, electrifying burst of speed, she pulled ahead. By a fraction of a second, she was first to blast across the finish line. The thundering cheers matched the thundering of her own heart. She had made history. She had won for an astonishing 3rd time. Can you believe it? 3 Olympic gold medals for Wilma Rudolph. At her 3rd ceremony that week, as the band played the Star-Spangled Banner, Wilma stood tall and still like a queen, the last of her 3 Olympic gold medals hanging around her neck. Wilma Rudolph, once known as the sickliest kid in Clarksville, had become the fastest woman in the world. Wow. It's unbelievable, right? I want to share in the back of this book, they have something called author's notes. And I want to share with you the author's notes. Wilma Rudolph became, at age 20, the first American woman to win 3 gold medals at a single Olympics. When she returned home from Rome, her family was waiting for her, and so was all of Clarksville, Tennessee. The huge parade and banquet held in her honor were the first events. So the parade and the banquet were the first events in the town's history to include both blacks and whites. So Wilma's winning brought that community together. During the time of Wilma's childhood in the 1940s, polio also known as infantile paralysis, it's a tough word, was the world's most dreadful disease. A cure for it was not found until 1955. By then, it had killed or crippled 357,000 Americans, and most of them were kids. Only 50,000 fewer than the number of Americans who had died in World War II. So an awful lot of people were stricken with polio during that time before they found the medicine to fix it. As she retired from her career as a runner in 1962, guess what Wilma became? A second grade teacher. Can you believe it? She became a second grade teacher and, of course, a high school coach. She remained a much admired celebrity, but to prove that there was no more to her than just running, she started a company, and she called her company Wilma Unlimited, and that gave opportunities for her to travel, to lecture, and to support causes that she believed in. Later, she found something called a nonprofit foundation called Wilma Rudolph Foundation to nurture young athletes and to teach them that they too can succeed despite all the odds against them. The story of all she overcame in order to win at the Olympics has inspired thousands of young athletes, especially women. Wilma is no longer alive. I know a lot of folks always want to know that. She died in 1994. Boys and girls, it was so terrific sharing one of my favorite stories with you. Think of her grit. Think of her determination. Think of her perseverance. When we come against some things that might seem troubling or impossible, think of Wilma, right? Have a great day.